Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. We help people to combat the negativity that inundates their daily lives with a positive perspective and positive action. Today's guest is Jeff Perry. Jeff is a mechanical and software engineering leader turned leadership career coach for engineers. What a swap. He has moved from developing products to developing people as the founder of More Than Engineering. His unique focus on mindset helps engineers get clarity on their goals, take ambitious action, make intentional career moves, and level up their careers and lives in a holistic way. Every interaction is designed to be transformational, not transactional. So please welcome to the show, Jeff Perry. Jeff, thanks so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate you.
Bob, I'm excited about this. Thanks for having me.
Well, great. Well, why don't we tell people more about you? Because I find it interesting. You've gone from the engineering to the dark side, if you will, to the people side. So tell us your avenue and how you got to where you are today.
Well, the dark side and the light side, just a matter of perspective, depends on who you're talking to, right?
Yeah.
So, because the engineers would call marketing and sales the dark side, probably.
Right.
So, anyway, there's long stories to it. Went through a number of different phases of my career. Mechanical, did software, back into mechanical manufacturing, interacted with electrical and civil engineers, did a lot of different things into engineering leadership. But about 5 years ago, on top of the engineering leadership work that I was doing, I got the opportunity to work on leadership and mindset training internal to the company that I was at the time. And I recognized as I got into that sort of work, where it was really connected to the personal change and opportunities that each of us had as people, as humans, right? I recognized that when I got into that work that I looked forward to those days when I was doing that. And it's just kind of a side thing, aside from the main engineering leadership work that I was doing. But I looked forward to those days and I lit up, I got excited, and I enjoyed and found fulfillment in that work more so than any of the other engineering and engineering leadership work that I was doing. And so I started looking for ways, how can I do more of this?
Right.
And so it took me a while. I explored a lot of different things, but eventually a couple years later, got to kind of a career plateau where I recognized that there was a shift that needed to happen for me. Didn't know exactly what that looked like, but I spent a lot of time in reflection and introspection, trying to figure out what was next, and journaling a lot. But it's eventually decided, as I was thinking of ideas, I had a day where I was journaling and I had a bunch of ideas of different engineering principles and how doing this personal organizational development type work that I wanted to do, how some of those principles really interacted in really cool ways. And I had this day where I just couldn't stop writing. And so I sort of took that as a sign and been running with this, and that turned into More Than Engineering, and been building that ever since.
And that's awesome because, people got to realize no matter what you do, it's the people first. Everybody comes to work. They're all people. And no matter what they do, they come with worries of their children, worries of their parents, what's going on in their life. It's all with them. And we need to be able to adapt to those type of things. And you're in a unique niche because it seems like you're helping, if you will, those technical people open up, like you said, open up their minds, open up their opportunities. So how did you make that shift? You talked about it briefly there, but did you have to go through that shift yourself in doing what you're doing to be able to explain that to others? How was that shift for you, and how do you help others to do that?
Yeah, so a lot of the things that I drew from was some of the mindset stuff that I had the opportunity to teach internally in the job that I was at, but also some of the other things I was learning is I was thinking, for what's my next career transition? How do I make that? I couldn't find great tools to figure that out, especially with engineers and technology people who are so versatile in the types of work that they can do, different directions they can take their careers, a lot of different options that could have been in front of me. But finding and going through that process of getting clarity of what was right for me, that was a difficult process.
Mm-hmm.
And so I absolutely had to go through that for me personally. And that's, I've been able to draw on that and since learned a lot of other tools that I've added to the tool belt to help other people do some of that, to shift some of their mindsets, to get clarity on what's most important to them and where they want to go, so that they can then map out the steps they need to take to achieve those goals. Because if we don't know where we're going, then how do we know what we should be working on at any given time, right? And so that's a big
It's
deal.
hard to get there. Yeah.
Yeah. So And then certainly we can map out the pragmatic, practical steps to actually doing that to help people move through that, whether individually or collectively as a team. But I'm just big on that and how mindsets, how we think about the whole process, the people that we interact with, how we think about ourselves, those beliefs we have, how that fuels our behaviors, what we do, which then fuels our results. So mindset first is a big deal to me.
Awesome. And it's interesting because you say, how you journal that and map that out. As an engineer, you're usually pretty detail oriented, and in
Yeah.
mapping out processes is usually part of the job description and job what you do. But then when you look at, okay, I got to do this for myself as a person, as something I don't want that's not technically oriented, and it's confusing for a lot of people. How do you help people get over that? Because that's a hurdle that I'm sure they have to come about with.
Yeah, for everyone, the fear around that is a little bit different, right? So for some, they're fearing uncertainty of like what might be on the other side. I don't know what that is. And I love the quote by a psychologist by the name of Virginia Satir. She says, people prefer the certainty of misery to the misery of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes we stick to things that aren't a good fit for us, but because it's familiar, we like that, even though the uncertainty, yeah, that's hard. It's hard to go through. We don't know what's on the other side, but we know that where we're at right now isn't great. So at least we can start exploring and running through some different experiments there. And that's really one way to frame it for engineers and technology people is that, excuse me, that it really is a way to look at this as an experiment or creating a prototype or something, that as we go through these different exercises, we're just collecting data.
Yeah,
right. And it's a different sort of data
yeah.
that maybe we're not going to be able to map out perfectly on a spreadsheet or grab from a database. But it's data, it's information that we need to have about ourselves and about how we view the world around us, so that we can operate appropriately, at least appropriately for us. But that's different. So some of the fears that are holding people back, like I said, some of that uncertainty, or what am I going to see on the other side, or what am I going to realize about myself that I don't want to know, or this seems hard and I'm used to, I can speak to myself. I've been a long time emotional suppressor. If I felt uncomfortable emotions, I would just suppress them rather than acknowledge them. Because I felt like they were bad and I didn't want to address them. Now there's a difference there, but perhaps some people are the same way as I was and still trying to transition out of in many cases, right? So there are all sorts of fears we might have, but the point is, if we're trying to become something that we want to become, then this is work worth doing. Right? Because if we're not intentional about this process, about who we want to become and mapping out that process, then, other people, other priorities, other situations, those are going to dictate who we become rather than us dictating who we become in our lives and our careers. And so we may as well be the ones who are intentional, proactive, and deliberate about it rather than letting someone else make those decisions.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to always ask people, whose life is it anyway?
Yeah.
You said it in that, if you don't make a plan, somebody else is going to make it for you. Just look at your calendar. Who books the time on your calendar? Is it you, or do you have 10 meetings or more meetings every week automatically?
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, you talk about that, intentionality, and tell us more about that, because that's pretty interesting. You're gearing into that. You're talking about mindset. You're talking about mapping things out. Tell us about the intentionality, because I think that's important for people to understand too.
Yeah, so there's a lot of tools and ways to do that, and I actually put something together for listeners of the podcast here, Bob. So before we get into it, because I know if anyone's like me when they're listening to podcasts, they're usually doing something else, out and about, driving or exercising or doing something else. So put something together. People can go grab a bunch of resources. We call my Career Clarity Checklist at www.engineeringcareeraccelerator.com/encouragement engineering. So just for listeners of you, then go grab that and make sure to put those W's in there. Otherwise, it won't work quite right. So
thank you for that.
Anyway, so some of the things that we go through and the reasons why intentionality, to use that word, is so important. We're talking about this a little bit, but I like to sometimes use the old story. You ever heard Alice in Wonderland, old Disney movie, and book by Lewis Carroll. Anyway, there's one point where Alice is in this magical world, Wonderland, and she's kind of lost in the forest, and she comes to a fork in the road, and there's this other character there hanging out watching her, the Cheshire Cat. And Alice at this spot, she asks the cat, says, which path should I take? And the cat asks, well, where are you trying to go? To which Alice responds, I don't know. And to which the cat says, well, if you don't know where you're trying to go, any path will get you there, right? So again, just this idea of there are many different paths we can take. How do we define what's right for us? Well, we need to determine the direction we want to go. Now, does that mean in terms of being intentional or having clarity in our careers that we're going to have every single step mapped out for the rest of our lives? Absolutely not. It's not like we're going to have this magical treasure map and X marks the spot and we're going to have every step mapped along the way. But can we define a North Star, a guiding light, right? Or maybe another way to think about it is a set of filters, values, or things that are really important to you so that as you make decisions, so that as you have opportunities that come your way, you can run it through those filters and consider, is this right for me? Is this in line with the things I want to learn, the person I want to become, the areas I want to explore? If yes, then continue to explore that. If not, then don't waste any more time with it. Right. But, and if you're in a position now where you're saying this isn't meeting those criteria, then how can I explore, run some experiments, try some new things? Now that could look like getting a new job, but that could also look like raising your hand or volunteering to do a new assignment at your current role, or taking a side gig or volunteering for an organization that might give you experiences that you want to try out, whether that's leadership opportunities, speaking, running a certain type of project, whatever that could be that you want to try out that you haven't done before. Find a small way to run a micro experiment, collect some data, right? And then you can say, did I like that? Did I not? If so, then maybe I can find more ways to do that and map towards where I want to get to. But it's this process of deciding what's the next thing I want to learn? What's the next thing I want to try? How can I move through that in this iterative process as we go throughout our lives?
You bring up a good point too, is raise your hand. Sometimes in meetings, I know in technical meetings, you're worn out with the acronym soup and everything like that. And you get towards the end and are there any questions or anything? And you get the glazed looks because everybody either needs more coffee or has to use a restroom or is just done with the meeting. But, ask that question or quit. If you don't have time at the meeting, make sure to contact the manager or whatever. Throw your hat in the ring because so many times people don't speak up and that's how they miss out on some of these opportunities. Give it a shot. It doesn't hurt. People are always looking for those that want to step up and take ownership of something or do that little bit of extra effort for things. I think that's a good example you bring up.
Yeah, I like to sometimes say, see a need, fill a need, right? Yeah. Like recognize those opportunities that need to be filled. Can you fill those gaps?
Yeah.
Instead of just complaining about it, like, hey, can you raise your hand and suggest, hey, maybe I can do something about this. Right? Take some personal ownership. And honestly, that's part of what got me on this path is those years ago, we had some training that got brought into the leadership team. I was a part of that. And we're thinking about what do we do with this now? We thought about running that to the rest of the company. And I raised my hand and said, this really changed how I think about things. I would love to engage with this more deeply and share this with more people. And they said yes, and I got to share this training and these impacts for the rest of the company. And so, which got me engaged in that in a deeper way, which has changed me even further. But then again, it brought out this new opportunities and ways of me thinking about how I work with people, and has changed the trajectory of my career and the things that I've been involved in because of that, and the joy that I find in it. Right. So, but it wouldn't have happened if I didn't raise my hand and say I'm interested in this. Right.
Yeah, a very good point, because that's how you, even if you talk about, helping people make career and goal changes, how are you doing that? You get the clarity, you say, hey, I want to do this. I want to step up and be different with this. And I think that's something we also need to help people to remember is, like you said earlier, it's going to be uncomfortable. We're not going to know what that next step in the path might be. It could be great. It could be not so great. but we have the ability within us to overcome that. It's not so great and adapt to it. I think that's a key point. Subconsciously you're kind of talking about here. Be adaptable for the growth. Be adaptable for change. Be adaptable to take the chances.
Yeah, absolutely. And that points me to some of the mindset principles we might want to talk about here for a moment. Is one of the mindsets that maybe a lot of people are familiar with, probably the one that's gotten the most traction in the last 20 years or so, is that of the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, really popularized by Carol Dweck, wrote a book about it, really famous TED Talk from years ago. And the book is called Mindset. I think I forget what the subtitle is, but it's, if you look up mindset book, you're going to find this one. Okay. but the idea is growth, which the antithesis of it is a fixed mindset. So a fixed mindset is I don't think that I can change. And I also don't really think that other people can either, that I feel like all of us are sort of locked in, like this is who we are and this is who we're always going to be. These are our main strengths and abilities. Yeah. And if I'm not good at something now, that's probably always going to be the case. Right. If it's not naturally easy for me, then, I probably shouldn't waste any time on it. Right. Whereas a growth mindset says, hey, if there's something that I want to learn, I can spend the time, put that energy and effort into learning that. If there's an area I want to grow, if there's something I want to try, I can do that. If there's a change I want to make in my life, recognize that is possible if I really care about it. Now, is that going to be absolutely easy? No, we need to move through this process. But if we put on and recognize that if there's a failure, we can get up and try again. Right. And we can learn from that experience and still grow, even when we fall and trip and have disappointments or rejections along the way in our lives and our careers. Those aren't indications that there's something wrong with us. That those are opportunities. And that's easier said than done. But that's the beauty of this mindset, is it enables us to see the progress and the opportunity in front of us, rather than seeing us as fixed. I can't change, I can't grow, can't develop. That's going to put us in the state of, what's the point? Why even try? And therefore our growth is completely diminished when we take that approach. Right.
Yeah. And it's interesting because for anybody that has walked in their lives, you have the growth mindset. Maybe you forgot how to use it, because when we were kids learning how to walk, we fell down dozens and dozens and dozens and made thousands of times, skinned our knees. Oh, yeah. So we kept going. We can still do that as we get older. We've been taught by society, no, don't do that. No, sit back. No, be quiet. Don't take the chances. No, that's not really what, if we have the mindset and the capability that we want to do something, I think we can overcome that mindset and go forward. You're talking about a positive growth mindset. That's a great, example for people that we can move forward. We can do better things. So great ideas with that. And it's interesting too, because you talk to people about the idea that, okay, in these experiences, there may be disappointments. How can we help people keeping on, if you will, even when disappointments occur, because they're going to occur?
Yeah, there's all sorts of disappointments with the work that I do with people and some of the things that they're trying to do. So a good chunk of people that I work with are trying to make some big change in their lives and their careers, right? They're trying to get that promotion, or they're trying to get that new opportunity to level up, get something that's going to be a better fit for them. And so we work through some of that clarity work, but then sometimes when those opportunities come, they've emotionally invested, they've got this interview with what they think is like a dream job, right? Mm-hmm. And they can do everything right and put their best foot forward, and still sometimes it's just not the right fit, or the day was off, or all sorts of things can happen, right? And so they feel this disappointment. Well, taking a growth mindset approach is trying to detach from the outcome and recognize that this whole experience is there for our learning. Okay. And I've had people who they've had, someone who had, this was an opportunity that's probably going to double their salary, mm-hmm. like a huge jump and opportunity for the future. And it didn't pan out. And they were frustrated because they put hours and hours and hours into prep for this. But we shifted, how they looked at that and said, you know what, all these hours of preparation, that's only going to help me for the next opportunity, right? Like this one didn't work out. Okay. But the next one, I didn't waste all that time because I learned so much through that experience. And then sure enough, that the next opportunity came and they got it, and they got a sweet upgrade and something that they're really excited about, right? And so it may not come the first time, may not come the second time, but it eventually will come, right? If we put in that work and that effort, so that time is not wasted, even though there may be rejections and seeming failures along the way. Those failures, those rejections are opportunities to learn and grow through the process.
And that's such a great reminder for people that, constantly growing, we're going to fall down. It'll hurt. It will bleed. And, like you said, your disappointments, but you learn from it. Did I answer that question? Could I have done this better? You start to analyze what went on, and it helps you, again, for the next time. It helps you to be better prepared. I always find it interesting when people go to the interviews and they, ask, well, what could I do better? And somebody says, well, they may not give feedback, or they give limiting feedback. Try to dig in for more feedback. That's just growth opportunity. Whether it was something you said, how you said it, what you wore, how you appeared, whatever it may be, take all that. It's not personal, but take that growth opportunity.
Yeah,
great,
absolutely. Yeah.
It's a great reminder for people.
Yeah. And another on the mindset side, there are all sorts of mindsets we hear about, and they give them names and whatever. And a lot of them can be quite useful. I'll just share one more outside of that growth fixed option, that's really more personal based. It's really our personal connection with other people. It's called the outward versus the inward mindset. And this is more about defining how we see people in our lives that we interact with in our work, in our personal lives, in our community, and all sorts of things. Do we see people as people,
right?
Or do we see people as objects that we can use in some way, perhaps, or maybe they're obstacles in our way, or maybe they're just irrelevant, right? So that's the difference between an outward mindset. If we see people as people, therefore we care about what they care about. They matter like we matter. We're not just putting ourselves first. We're seeing that we're all part of humanity, and we need to care about other people and consider their perspectives and what they're working on, what they care about, right? Versus the inward mindset, self-focused. What's in it for me?
Yeah.
What can you do for me? You're in my way. Get out of the way. I don't care about you. I'm just going to ignore you. These sorts of ways about approaching people, which how impactful can that be when we can shift that with how we work with people. I work with people all the time. And we usually, when we're working together, we do some assessments, and it gives some awareness, like, hey, where am I at right now with some of these mindsets? And people, they answer these questions, they go through some of these learnings about these things. They're like, I didn't even realize this. I just showed up to work, tried to do the best I could, but I had my headphones on. I didn't even consider how what I was doing impacted other people. And now I realize why I haven't been getting some of the results that I wanted to, because I've just been doing my thing instead of really considering what's best for the team, what's best for the company, what's best for the other people that I'm impacting. And now they started to shift it. You can change some of your ways of thinking about that in an instant.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's great that you remind people of that, because we're not on this planet alone.
Right.
There's billions and billions of other people, and there's probably 2 to more people that you work with directly. Interact with them. They are people. Everybody is a person, and they have, like I said before, they have worries of their mother, their kids, all those things. They're concerned about, making things meet. It could be a father that's wanting to make sure his kids come up properly, whatever it may be. They're similar to what's going on in your life, most likely.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone's got stuff they're dealing with and things they're trying to go through and ways they're trying to grow and improve. But if we can learn about that, consider that, get to know people in that way, then suddenly we can make adjustments in how we work with them, how we interact with them, how we collaborate with them. And we're probably going to be more effective in our work. And certainly at home, we're going to be happier and be able to work together and collaborate there in those important relationships that we really care about. So instead of just being self-focused, like, hey, what can everyone else do to make my life easier? Well, that generally doesn't actually turn into your life being easier or happier, by the way.
Yeah.
Usually just creates more problems for you. In fact, so often that sometimes the very things that you hate are the things that you are feeding with the ways that you are operating when you're taking a self-focused approach. You're actually encouraging more negative behavior from other people, because how we show up actually invites that in other people.
That's so true. just drive through traffic and watch.
Right.
Yeah, that's so true. Wow, that's a good reminder for people. I love that line. So great reminder for everyone. Well, Jeff, where can people find out more about you and getting hold of you? Because I think it's important they make sure they know where you're at, and what you offer. It sounds like a great fit for not only technical people, but like I said, the mindset shift that our society needs, not only today, but in the future.
Yeah, so thanks for asking, Bob. And like I said, that free resource, that career clarity checklist, I'd invite everyone to check out at www.engineeringcareeraccelerator.com/encouragement engineering, just for listeners of the show. And then I'm active on LinkedIn and other places they can find me, but that's probably the best place I'd point people to, and then we'll get connected there.
Awesome. We will make sure we put all that in the show notes and have that information out there. And again, thanks for doing that for our listeners. I really appreciate that, because showing them that they're a little bit special, that's always a nice touch. So thank you so much for doing that, Jeff.
Yeah, well, you're special, Bob, so I did it for you.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for taking the time, for being a guest on the Encouragement Engineering podcast. I really appreciate what you're doing and what you're doing for our society. So thank you for taking the time today and being a guest. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Bob, and appreciate all the things you're doing trying to spread more positivity in the world. So thanks so much.
All right. Well, thank you. You have a great day.